Howdy, howdy. Chris here, and on last week's episode of Garage Noise, we were able to straighten the dent on this Ford F-150 bedside. We did a little bit of pushing, we did a little bit of pulling, then we filled it, blocked it, and put it into primer and got it ready for paint. Today we're going to finish this repair. I'm going to show you exactly how we do it, prepping out the primer and painting it. So let's dig in and get started. So I went ahead and I sprayed a guide coat on this, and we're going to go ahead and block it and see how straight it is. We've got a little work to do right around this contour in this bed. There's a contour that runs right along here, and it's a little bit wonky here. I could see it in the primer. Body lines are really straight there. They look really good, so a little bit of blocking there, but hoping it doesn't take too much blocking because we need to get this painted today. Let's get some 320 grit sandpaper on a long block and block this out. Last week we did a really good job, took some time and got our bodywork really straight. So now after we've primed it, we shouldn't take too much to block this out. So we've got our long block with some 320 grit sandpaper. We're using a crosshatch pattern. We're blocking it in an X, and that gives you the best results to get this panel straight. The upper part of this bedside blocked out great. All the guide coat has disappeared. We had a couple little low areas that we were able to block out, but now let's address the lower part of this bedside. Sometimes these contours in these bedsides can be a little bit tricky to get them to look like factory, but they are a little bit forgiving as well. But this vehicle being black, it has to be really straight because black is going to show up any waves or imperfections. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a couple different blocks to do this. We're going to use a round block, and that'll sweep through that contour of that body and get that flat. So we're going to use a long round block to block that contour out. Now, I did notice here there was a little bit of a high spot that we need to tap down. We're going to address that, and then we're going to clean up this body line just a little bit with a little bit of icing. Okay, so after feeling this over, I felt there's a little bit of a wonky section right here. There's a little bit of a high spot in the metal that I had to tap down, and we're going to fill that just a little bit and block that straight. I'm going to use a real thin coat of icing. Icing is a polyester glazing putty. It's perfect for this situation just to take out a little bit of a wave. So it's going to be a real thin coat so it's easy to block. This body line here has a little bit of a wave to it, or a section where it goes up. So we're going to put a little bit of icing there as well, and we'll use this to block that nice and straight. I need to block out this groove in this section of this quarter panel. So I'm using the edge of one of my blocks. It fits perfectly in that little flat section, and we're going to put a piece of 320 grit sandpaper over the block, and I'm going to just slide it in there, holding it flat to block that out. I'm using a piece of 180 grit sandpaper on a small, firm block to block out this section here and get that body line straight and shaped. Then later on, we'll go back over it with some 320 grit sandpaper to remove those 180 grit scratches. Now that we have this bedside blocked and ready for paint, I'm going to address the wheel opening molding. It had some deep scratches in the plastic, so we prepped it with some 180 grit sandpaper, and then we filled it with just a little bit of icing, and we're blocking this straight. And then we're going to prime it, and we'll get it ready for paint. After we repaired those couple areas, I went ahead and put a second coat of the Roberlo ME1 over this repair area. I did reduce it 10%, and this is just a finished coat of primer. Now we're just going over it with some 600 grit sandpaper. This will help remove any minor scratches that we might have missed on the first coat of primer. I went ahead and added a guide coat over the repair area, and now we're going to sand this entire bedside with 600 grit sandpaper on the orbital sander. I'm using the guide coat to make sure the texture is good on this primer and it's nice and smooth. This will help show any texture that's left in the primered areas, and we want that to be totally smooth before we apply paint. And then we're going to use the orbital sander to sand these large surface areas with 600 grit. And then I'll go around by hand and hand sand all the edges. Now I'm staying away from the edges with this orbital sander. I don't want to burn through any edges in an area that we're not putting color on. Now I'm just going to blow off all the dust, and then we'll wash it with some wax and grease remover and get it ready to be masked off. And just like that, we are ready to paint. I am going to use my favorite gun right now, which is a 3M Performance gun. And in my opinion, this gun is perfect for a DIYer. And it's perfect for a pro as well. There's a lot of things to love about this gun. It's very versatile. It comes with exchangeable tips. You can use it for a primer, a sealer, the paint gun, a clear coat gun, and it performs amazing. And it's not a super expensive gun, so it works really well for a DIY or home use. I just can't say enough about it. If you haven't checked it out, check out the review and demo I did on it. I can leave a link at the end, but definitely consider this gun if you're looking for your first gun. Okay, so before you apply the first coat of base, make sure your panels are clean. You've washed them with wax and grease remover. Then you want to tack it off with a tack rag just before you start spraying the base. Now the first coat, we want to cover the primered areas and get a good coat on those primered areas, a medium coat. You don't want it to be super wet. You want to overlap 70% on your passes. It's more important on a high metallic finish, but get in the habit of overlapping 70% on your passes. So get the first coat on. Now the settings on this gun, I am running 20 PSI on the air pressure, and that's very good for base. Now when I go up to clear, I'm going to bump it up to about 24. You want to have consistent speed, consistent distance from the panel, 3 to 5 inches away typically. I have the fan pattern nearly wide open on this gun. I've dialed it back just a little bit. Now make sure you get all the edges, like in that taillight pocket, all the low areas you want to make sure you get covered. And if you can't see, get a light down there so you don't have any see-through areas on your base. Okay, let's finish up the base on this, and then I'll show you and explain to you how you can lay clear coat like glass. Time for some clear coat. So let's mix up some Valspar V-Series clear. This is a high solids clear. We're going to lay on our first coat. We're not worried about it being absolutely perfect. We want to get a good coat of clear coat on for the first coat, and then we'll get our gloss and our shine and our flow on our second coat of clear. So I've set up my gun at about 24 PSI on the air pressure. We've got the fan pattern nearly wide open. We're going to overlap 70% on our passes. You want to have a consistent speed and a consistent distance from the panel. Don't be timid when you're laying down your clear coat. Be relaxed, have fun with it. Just remember your technique. You want to have a consistent distance from the panel, 3 to 5 inches, depending on what you like. You want to have a consistent speed and make uniform passes across that panel. Okay, now let's lay down the second coat of clear. And on this coat, we want to make sure it flows out nicely, gives us that high glass-like finish when we're done. In order to do that, we're going to watch the clear coat lay on this panel. Make sure it's flowing out properly. We're going to remember our technique, overlap 70%, have consistent speed, consistent distance. I've got my volume turned to 3 turns out on the volume for this particular gun. Of course, my fan pattern is nearly wide open, and I'm just slowing down just a little bit, letting that material flow onto that panel and watching it as it flows out. Now, if I do see that there's a little bit too much orange peel, what I'll probably do is dial my volume down just a little bit and my air pressure up just a little bit. That'll help it to atomize and give me a flatter, better finish. Let's finish up this last coat of clear and take a look at the finished results. Help support the channel by commenting down below and liking this video. I appreciate each and every one of you watching. We'll see you next time on Garage Noise.